Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take a stack of sources, articles, research, our own notes, pull out the most important pieces, and try to figure out what it all means for you.
Yeah, make sense of the complex stuff.
Exactly. And today, we are launching into a really compelling question, one that feels more urgent every day, honestly. How is artificial intelligence, this rapidly evolving technology that's, integrating itself into pretty much every corner of our lives? How does it interacting with something as deeply fundamental and personal as our human personality?
It's a huge question. It feels like it's more than just using a new tool, isn't it?
Definitely.
We're looking at systems that learn from us, predict our preferences, even mediate how we interact with the world and with each other.
Right.
This relationship is becoming incredibly complex and fast.
Yeah, incredibly fast. And to unpack this, we've gathered some fascinating research papers that dive deep into this precise question.
Good stuff, hopefully.
Yeah, think of this deep dive as our guided tour through these sources. We're going to try and extract the absolute must-know insights, the kind that maybe make you pause and think about your own daily life a bit differently.
Okay, so our mission today, based on what these papers are telling us, seems pretty clear.
What do we got?
We want to understand, from the various perspectives in these sources, how AI might actually be influencing our personality. Then there are the serious ethical and moral considerations that just, pop up because of this interaction.
Big ones.
And maybe the most interesting part, how our own unique personality traits might shape how we feel about AI in the first place.
Well, that's fascinating. Why do some of us jump right in while others are, deeply wary?
Exactly. That variation is key.
So let's get started. We're going to break down some complex ideas from these sources, look at some findings that might surprise you. And hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer, more nuanced picture of what this rapidly evolving relationship between AI and humanity really means for you personally.
Sounds like a plan. Where do we start?
Okay, let's unpack this by first making sure we're all on the same page. What do we actually mean by AI and personality when we're talking about them in the context of these sources?
Good call. Definitions matter here.
Yeah, it sounds simple, but getting a clear definition from the research really helps us understand the depth of the interaction we're discussing.
Right.
So one of our core sources gives us a good foundational understanding. It defines AI as essentially computer programs driven by complex algorithms.
Okay.
Their key characteristic, it says, is that they learn from data to mimic human cognitive functions.
Things like thinking, problem solving.
Decision-making, yeah. Those higher-level functions.
So it's not just about programming a machine to do one specific task over and over again, like an old-school automation?
Exactly. It's about systems that can process vast amounts of information, spot patterns we might miss.
And adapt their performance over time, right, without needing explicit programming for every single scenario.
That's the key. They learn and evolve, much like humans do in certain ways, although obviously in a digital realm.
Okay, got it.
Learning algorithms.
And the context around this AI is crucial too. This same source talks about the rapid pace of change. It calls it AI disruption.
Disruption, strong word.
Yeah, and it says this isn't a slow trickle of new technology. It's described as a torrential current.
Wow.
Especially when AI is combined with the Internet of Things or IoT, all those connected devices in our homes, cars, cities.
As they're talking to everything else.
Right. This disruption is happening much faster than people previously imagined. It's causing rapid transformative changes.
In what ways?
In our mindsets, our actions, our daily activities. It's hitting us on multiple levels.
And that pace is key, isn't it? Because it means the potential influence isn't some abstract future thing.
No, it's now. It's happening now. It's impacting how we live, how we work, how we interact with technology on a really fundamental level. It's basically changing the environment that our personality has to adapt to.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, so that's the AI side, these learning adaptive programs causing rapid disruption. Now, what about personality?
The other side of the equation.
Yeah, it's that unique core of who we are, right?
Yeah.
But defining it precisely is vital if we want to understand how an external force like AI might interact with it.
Makes sense.
Source 1 offers a couple of definitions from psychology. One, citing Pervin and Servone, describes personality as the characteristic pattern that causes consistency of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors.
Oh, okay, so consistency, patterns, that sounds about right. The things that make you recognizably you over time.
And then there's another definition, drawing from Allport, which calls it a more dynamic concept.
Dynamic how?
It calls it a dynamic organization within a person's psychophysiological system that determines their unique adaptation model to his environment.
Whoa, okay. Psychophysiological system. Unique adaptation model. That sounds more complex.
It does, but it highlights that personality isn't just static traits. It's this internal system involving mind and body that forms the basis of your unique way of interacting with and navigating the world around you, how you adapt.
So putting those together, we've got consistent patterns of feeling, thinking, behaving on one hand, and on the other, this dynamic, unique internal organization that drives how we adapt to our environment.
Exactly. These definitions emphasize stability, individuality, but also that adaptive nature of who we are.
Right.
And this is precisely where the core question of this whole deep dive really emerges, as highlighted by the sources.
Okay, lay it on us.
Given AI's increasing presence, its ability to learn about us, its capacity to interact with us in these really complex ways, how does that affect this consistent, dynamic, utterly unique aspect of our being?
How does this rapidly evolving digital force influence the very pattern that makes you, well, you?
That's it. That's the central tension these sources are exploring.
It sets the stage perfectly for examining both the practical mechanics, how AI exerts influence, and maybe the deeper, often subtle shifts it might be causing in that core pattern of personality.
Okay, so let's dive into those mechanics first. How does AI actively influence how we think and act? According to the research, specifically Source 1. It breaks this down into influence on our mindset and influence on our behavior.
Makes sense. Mindset and behavior.
Let's start with mindset. How does AI get inside our heads, so to speak?
Well, on the mindset side, a major player, one you probably encounter dozens of times a day without even thinking about it, is information filtering.
The algorithms deciding what we see.
Exactly. AI powers the algorithms that determine what information you see online. This is happening constantly. Social media feeds, search results, news aggregators.
Even which emails land in your priority inbox versus, promotions.
Right. And crucially, according to the source, this filtering isn't neutral. It's not just sorting, it's transformative. These algorithms shape your perception and your understanding of the world. They essentially act as gatekeepers, curating the information you receive.
Okay.
So this directly influences your mindset because the reality you interact with online is being constructed for you, piece by piece.
So if the algorithm primarily feeds me content aligned with, say, one political viewpoint or one particular hobby,
it reinforces that perspective.
Right.
And it can make it significantly harder to even encounter, let alone understand, alternative views or different kinds of information that fall outside that pattern.
Wow. So it's not just showing me things I like, it's potentially hiding things I don't know about or disagree with.
Precisely. And this is very tightly coupled with personalization.
Right, the tailoring.
AI uses the vast amounts of data it collects about you, your clicks, how long you pause on a video, your purchase history, your likes, who you interact with.
All that digital exhaust.
To serve you personalized content. And it feels helpful on the surface, doesn't it?
Yeah. Tailored shopping suggestions, music recommendations that actually get my taste, news stories I'm likely to find interesting.
Yeah.
It saves time.
It does. But the source highlights the significant flip side. While this personalization caters to your existing preferences, it can dramatically limit your exposure to anything outside that preference bubble.
The filter bubble again.
You get more of what confirms your existing tastes or beliefs, and potentially less, much less, of what challenges them or introduces genuine novelty.
That seems like a profound influence on mindset. It's creating these filter bubbles, or echo chambers, which aren't just social phenomena. They're actually technologically reinforced by AI.
Exactly. It actively narrows your digital environment. And remember that Allport definition of personality.
With dynamic adaptation to the environment.
Yes. If the environment itself is being curated to reinforce your existing patterns, how does that affect the dynamic aspect of your adaptation? Does it make us less adaptable, more rigid?
That's a fascinating point. It's not just what we think, but the very information landscape that influences how we think is being shaped subtly but constantly by AI.
Okay, so that's mindset. Now, moving from mindset to behavior, AI also directly influences the actions you take in your daily life.
How did that work in practice?
This often happens through machine learning and those recommendation systems we just touched on. AI algorithms analyze your past behavioral data, what products you've bought, videos you've watched, links you clicked,
Okay.
and then it uses that analysis to provide recommendations. Think about the recommended for you section on basically every shopping site now.
Or the up next autoplay on streaming platforms.
Or even suggested connections on professional networking sites, people you may know.
Right, but is that really influencing behavior or just suggesting?
Well, the source argues this isn't just passive suggestion. It actively nudges decisions and actions you take in daily life.
Nudges, like behavioral economics.
Kind of. By making certain choices more prominent or just easier, like automatically playing the next episode, or putting a highly relevant product right there in front of you with one-click purchase, AI guides your behavior.
Right.
Sometimes without you consciously making an effort to make that specific choice.
Okay, I see. The path of least resistance is laid out by the AI.
Exactly. My go-to example here is the endless scroll on platforms like TikTok or Instagram Reels.
Oh yeah, the times suck.
Right. The algorithm predicts exactly what kind of short video will keep you engaged next, based on your micro-interactions, and suddenly you find yourself scrolling for an hour.
When you only meant to check for 5 minutes.
Your behavior, your time allocation, is heavily influenced by that AI nudge, even if your initial intention was totally different.
That resonates deeply. It feels like your choice to watch something, but the duration and the specific path you take through the content are heavily mediated by that AI prediction engine.
Totally. And beyond recommendations, there are virtual assistants.
Like Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant.
Yes. AI acting as virtual assistants in your phone, your smart speaker, may be integrated into your car. The source notes that these assistants fundamentally change the way you interact with everyday technology and access information.
How so? More convenience.
Convenience, yes, but it changes the mode of interaction. Instead of opening an app or typing something into a search bar, you might just use a voice command.
Hey Google, what's the weather?
Right. Or instead of physically going to a store, you might just order something directly through a voice assistant. Instead of reading instructions for assembling furniture, you might have an AI assistant walk you through them verbally.
Okay, I see the shift in interaction style.
And over time, the source says, this shapes your habits and lifestyle. You become accustomed to hands-free interaction, to instant information retrieval via voice, to delegating simple tasks, setting timers, adding to lists, playing music to the AI.
These are definite shifts in our daily behavior patterns, aren't they?
They are. And those patterns are intrinsically linked to your personality and how you navigate your environment. If your unique adaptation model, to use Allport's term again, starts including heavy reliance on these AI tools for everyday functioning.
It's changing that model.
It seems plausible, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so it's clear AI isn't just a passive tool sitting there. It's actively curating our information environment, nudging our decisions, and changing our daily habits. That feels like a much more profound level of influence than just, say, using a new word processor.
It really is. And while AI offers incredible efficiency, convenience, powerful new capabilities,
Right.
These sources are also very clear that there are significant potential downsides. Adverse effects we really need to consider seriously precisely because of this deep level of influence.
Absolutely. Source 1 highlights several key risks that jump out. First up, dependency.
Yeah, this is the risk of becoming overly reliant on these AI systems. The source warns that when you consistently lean on AI to make decisions for you, or solve problems, or complete tasks that you could otherwise do yourself,
What happens?
it can lead to a reduction in your own cognitive capacities. Specifically, things like critical thinking abilities and creativity.
So it's like a mental muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it.
That's the idea. It's the mental equivalent of using a calculator for every single simple math problem. Eventually, your ability to do basic arithmetic in your head might diminish.
Or relying on AI to summarize complex documents without ever practicing reading comprehension and synthesis yourself.
Right. Or always using GPS for navigation, even for routes you know pretty well. You stop paying attention to landmarks, your spatial reasoning might weaken, you forget how to read a physical map. You're essentially delegating that cognitive work to the machine.
And if your unique way of adapting to the environment involves less reliance on your own reasoning and more on algorithmic outputs.
That's potentially altering your personality's functional expression, how you operate in the world.
Okay, dependency is a big one. Next, a major and frequently discussed concern: security and privacy.
Oh yeah, this is fundamental because AI is so incredibly data hungry.
Needs fuel.
Exactly. The source points out the significant concern about these systems collecting, analyzing, and storing vast, just unprecedented amounts of personal information about individuals.
And the risk here isn't just that they have the data, right? It's the potential for misuse.
Absolutely. The source is clear. This data can be misused by irresponsible parties. That could be malicious actors, hackers,
Or corporations with questionable ethics, maybe?
or even state surveillance. This misuse can compromise your personal data security, obviously, but also fundamentally violate your privacy.
And the scale of it is different now, isn't it? The sheer scale and detail of the personal profiles AI can build make this risk feel much more significant than, say, traditional data breaches of the past.
It really does. It's not just your credit card number potentially getting leaked. It could be predictive insights into your personality, your vulnerabilities, your likely future behavior, all used against you in ways we might not even foresee yet.
That's chilling.
All
Okay,
right.
what else? Bias and discrimination.
Another huge one. As we mentioned, AI learns from data. Source 1 is explicit about this. If the data used to train an AI is not diverse,
Or if it contains and reflects existing societal biases, whether those are conscious or unconscious biases baked into historical data.
then the AI's decisions will inherit and often amplify those biases.
So the AI isn't inherently biased, but it learns the biases present in the data we feed it.
Precisely. And this isn't just some neutral technological flaw. The source points out it's a mechanism that can actively perpetuate pre-existing social injustices.
You give an example.
A commonly cited one, which aligns with the source's point, is AI recruitment tools. They analyze resumes, maybe video interviews, applicant data.
Okay.
If the training data comes from historical hiring decisions, and those decisions were, say, biased against certain demographics, women, minorities, older workers,
Then the AI will learn to replicate those bias patterns.
exactly. It might learn to correlate certain keywords or schools or even speaking patterns with past successful hires who might have been predominantly from one group, and unintentionally but effectively filter out qualified candidates from other groups. It perpetuates the discrimination.
And this could happen in other areas too, right? Loan applications, criminal justice risk assessments.
Content moderation online, even medical diagnoses if the training data isn't representative. Anywhere, AI makes judgments based on potentially biased historical data.
Wow, okay, bias is critical. What's the last major risk highlighted?
Control and responsibility, or maybe the lack thereof.
What does that mean?
Many advanced AI systems, especially deep learning models, function essentially as black boxes.
Meaning we can't see inside.
Pretty much. Their decision-making processes are incredibly complex, often emerging from the interactions of billions of parameters in ways that are opaque and difficult for even the developers to fully understand or predict why a specific decision was made in a specific instance.
So you get an output, but you don't necessarily know this step-by-step reasoning behind it.
Right. And the source explains that this lack of transparency reduces accountability. It makes it hard to assign responsibility, especially when these AI systems are used in critical contexts affecting human life.
Like medical diagnosis you mentioned, or autonomous vehicles.
Or even complex financial modeling or legal decisions. If an AI makes a decision with severe negative consequences, a crash, a misdiagnosis, a discriminatory loan denial, understanding how it arrived at that decision.
And figuring out who's responsible, the developer, the user, the company that supplied the data.
It becomes incredibly challenging. This erodes trust and makes accountability very difficult to establish.
So, summing up these downsides, while the benefits of AI are real and significant,
These sources push us to confront these potential adverse effects. Losing our own cognitive skills through dependency, facing serious threats to our privacy and data security, experiencing discrimination perpetuated or even amplified by biased algorithms, and grappling with the fundamental difficulty of controlling and understanding these opaque AI decisions.
yeah, these aren't minor inconveniences, are they? They seem to directly impact human autonomy, fairness, well-being.
All of which relate back to that dynamic organization of personality adapting to its environment. If the environment includes these risks, our adaptation becomes much more complex and fraught.
It definitely paints a picture of AI as something that doesn't just exist alongside us, but actively shapes our environment, and in turn has the potential to shape us in pretty profound ways.
Exactly.
And building on those potential downsides, the sources delve even deeper, looking into the moral and ethical ripples of using AI, particularly regarding its implications for human personality and our interactions.
Right, moving beyond just the negative effects to the underlying principles and values at stake.
Source 1 gets into this quite a bit.
It does. For instance, that privacy concern we just discussed. It takes on a deeper ethical dimension here.
Also,
AI's ability to collect, analyze, and not just store, but interpret personal data, potentially even predicting aspects of your personality from your digital footprint, that raises profound ethical privacy concerns beyond just data security.
because it's about understanding the person.
Exactly. The source points out that this level of access and potential prediction, if it's misused, or even if it's just used without proper consent and genuine transparency, can seriously undermine an individual's personal freedom.
It feels invasive at a deeper level.
Right. Your personal information isn't just data points. It's intimately connected to your identity, your choices, your sense of self. Having this deeply personal information analyzed, perhaps exploited by an AI, especially if it's used to influence you without your full awareness.
That feels like a significant ethical violation, like trespassing on your autonomy.
The source suggests it's not just about preventing data breaches. It's about respecting the digital integrity and autonomy of the individual.
Okay. And this leads directly into another ethical issue mentioned. Using AI for automated decision-making based on this collected personality data.
Yeah, this is where it gets really tricky. The source discusses the ethical tightrope we walk when AI is used in critical applications like screening job applicants, evaluating loan eligibility, maybe even determining insurance rates.
Based, at least in part, on inferred personality traits or behavioral patterns derived from data.
Precisely. This is where the bias we talked about earlier becomes an acute ethical issue, not just a technical one.
Because the consequences are real-world discrimination.
Yes. If the algorithms are unfair, or if they make judgments based on personality data that isn't robust or fair, or maybe even relevant to the decision at hand, it can easily lead to discrimination or injustice.
So you could be denied a job or a loan, not based on your actual skills or creditworthiness, but on an AI's potentially flawed, opaque assessment of your personality fit or your risk profile, derived from who knows what data.
That's the danger. It's an ethical minefield, as you said.
Okay, what else on the ethical front? This next one sounds fascinating. How interacting with AI itself might change us.
Yes. This is a really interesting point the source makes. How interacting with AI, especially AI designed to be conversational or helpful, maybe even exhibiting something that feels like personality itself, could subtly alter your expectations for human interaction.
Wait, so the AI is kind of training us.
That's the implication. Imagine you get really used to using a virtual assistant or a chatbot. It's always instantly responsive, right?
Yeah, no waiting.
It never shows impatience. It's consistently agreeable or helpful, regardless of your tone.
Doesn't hold grudges.
Right. It has perfect recall of past interactions, maybe, without any emotional baggage. The source suggests that regular, prolonged interaction with systems like that could unconsciously shape your expectations for how people should behave.
Oh, wow. So then when I interact with a real human who is slow to respond or gets annoyed or misunderstands me or just has their own mood,
You might feel disproportionately frustrated or confused because your baseline expectation for interaction responsiveness, agreeableness, lack of friction has been subtly calibrated by the AI you're used to dealing with.
that could really affect real-world communication. My patience levels, maybe? How I handle conflict.
The source suggests it could subtly, over time, affect your real-world communication patterns and social dynamics because you've become accustomed to a different, much smoother, less friction-filled mode of interaction with AI.
And the human world is definitely messier and more complex than interacting with a programmed entity.
Infinitely messier. So this could have profound, albeit subtle, impacts on our social relationships and how we navigate human interactions.
That's a deeply thought-provoking point.
Yeah.
It really flips the script, not just us using AI, but AI influencing how we relate to each other.
And then there's the potential for manipulation. This becomes ethically charged when AI understands personality.
How so?
The source highlights that because these systems can analyze personal data to infer personality traits, preferences, maybe even vulnerabilities, they gain the ability to design highly customized messages or content specifically tailored to influence your decisions or beliefs.
So this is beyond just showing me ads for shoes I looked at.
Potentially, yes. This is about leveraging psychological insights derived from your data, your inferred personality traits, maybe your anxieties, your aspirational desires to craft messaging designed to exploit those aspects and push you towards a specific action.
Like buying a product or voting for a candidate, believing a certain piece of news.
Exactly. Think about hyper-targeted advertising designed to trigger specific emotional responses based on your inferred personality profile, or political messaging crafted to resonate deeply with your particular set of values or anxieties, maybe bypassing rational thought.
The source raises serious ethical questions about the power AI has to manipulate humans when it understands them on this intimate, data-driven level, especially since it often operates invisibly in the background.
And it's a significant concern.
So all of these moral and ethical ripples, privacy, biased decisions, changing social expectations, manipulation, they culminate in a clear call for responsibility, right?
Absolutely. The source emphasizes that navigating these challenges requires a collective effort. It states explicitly that developers who build these systems,
The users who deploy and interact with them.
and policymakers who regulate them, they all have a crucial ethical responsibility.
A shared responsibility.
Yes. They must ensure that algorithms are designed and used in ways that actively avoid bias, discrimination, unfair privacy violations. They need to respect individual freedoms, human dignity, basic integrity.
And this isn't something that just happens automatically by building cool tech.
Definitely not. It requires conscious, ethical consideration baked into the entire process from the very beginning. Data collection, algorithm design, right through to deployment and ongoing monitoring and auditing.
So policies and ethical practices are needed to guide AI development and use to make sure it serves human well-being rather than undermining it.
That's the core message.
It sounds like navigating these ethical landscapes requires constant vigilance, a really intentional human-centered approach. We have to acknowledge the profound power AI has to influence not just our external world, but our internal one and our relationships too.
It absolutely does, which leads us really nicely into considering the other side of the coin. It's not just how AI affects everyone universally. It's also about how our own unique personality might shape how we perceive and react to AI in the first place.
Ah, okay. This is where it gets really interesting and personal, doesn't it?
I think so. One of the sources points out that people have vastly different fundamental responses to AI. You see it all the time.
Like what?
Some people feel genuine excitement, optimism about its potential. Others perceive it primarily as a threat, something deeply unsettling.
And they also have different cognitive evaluations, right? Like, is AI warm and inviting? Or is it just cold, useful maybe, but not relatable?
Exactly. Understanding these widely varying individual differences is crucial if we want to understand how society as a whole will adopt and interact with AI.
And personality, being that relatively stable pattern of feelings, thoughts, actions we defined earlier, that seems like a powerful framework for predicting these different attitudes towards AI.
That's what the research suggests. So researchers have been working hard to measure these attitudes reliably.
Because it's tricky to measure an attitude towards something as broad as AI.
It is. One source describes the development and validation of a specific questionnaire for this called the Atari 12.
Right.
It was designed specifically because previous measures might have focused too narrowly on, say, a specific robot vacuum or a self-driving car concept. Atari 12 aims to capture attitudes towards AI as a single general construct.
So AI is a set of capabilities rather than one specific gadget.
Right. And it tries to measure cognitive beliefs about AI, affective or emotional responses to it, and behavioral intentions like willingness to use it all in a unified way.
Okay, so they have a tool. And using this tool, among others, they conducted studies to see how various personality traits relate to these general attitudes towards AI.
Exactly. And they looked at some well-established personality frameworks.
Which ones?
Well, they included the widely known Big Five personality traits.
Okay, remind us. Openness.
Openness to experience being imaginative, independent, liking variety. Conscientiousness being careful, organized, disciplined. Extroversion, sociable, fun-loving, energetic. Agreeableness, warm, cooperative, kind. And neuroticism, anxious, insecure, maybe prone to negative emotions.
The classic five. What else?
They also included the lesser-known but potentially relevant dark triad.
Ooh, sounds ominous.
It does. That's Machiavellianism being manipulative, cynical, psychopassive, antisocial, maybe remorseless. And narcissism, arrogant, self-important, entitled.
Okay, quite the lineup. Anything else?
Yes, plus one more. Conspiracy mentality, which is basically susceptibility to conspiracy theories and a general distrust of systems and authorities.
Wow, okay. That's a comprehensive list of traits they looked at. So what did they actually find in their study when they examined the relationship between these traits and general attitudes towards AI?
Several key findings emerged, and yeah, some might surprise you.
Lay them on me.
First, agreeableness, that trait associated with being warm, cooperative, kind, trusting. That was found to be a significant predictor of more positive attitudes towards AI.
Really? So the kinder, more cooperative, more trusting you tend to be as a person, the more likely you are to view AI favorably.
That is interesting. Why? What reasoning does the source give?
The source suggests a few potential reasons. One is that agreeable people tend to be more optimistic in general, so they might naturally focus more on the opportunities and benefits of AI rather than dwelling on the risks.
Okay, optimism makes sense.
But crucially, agreeable individuals also tend to trust others more easily.
Right, that's core to agreeableness.
So when faced with something as complex and often opaque as AI, which most non-experts don't fully understand technically, that inherent trusting nature could lead them to have more faith in the intentions of the developers, the companies, the institutions creating and deploying AI.
So they might sort of compensate for a lack of technical understanding by just trusting that the people behind it mean well. That's the hypothesis. If you're already predisposed to trusting others, extending that trust to the complex systems others build might feel like a more natural psychological step, even if you don't grasp all the details.
That explanation makes a lot of sense. Trust is so fundamental, and interacting with AI, especially systems that handle our data or make decisions, really does require a leap of faith, a degree of trust.
It does. Now, on the flip side, conspiracy mentality.
The general distrust trait.
Yes. That was found to be a significant predictor of more negative attitudes towards AI.
Okay, that connection seems much more intuitive, maybe.
It does feel more straightforward. If you are already prone to seeing hidden plots, powerful groups acting in secret, believing official explanations are just covers for darker truths.
Then a complex, rapidly advancing technology like AI, which can often feel opaque or even inscrutable,
would be fertile ground for suspicion, yeah. Fertile ground for negative interpretations and assuming malign intent.
Does the source connect this to real-world examples?
It does. It explicitly mentions how this finding aligns with real-world conspiracy theories involving technology, things like theories about secret nanochips in vaccines, or powerful global cabals using AI for mass surveillance or population control for sinister purposes.
So that underlying distrustful mindset latches on to AI as a plausible mechanism for these plots.
Exactly. And they make a crucial point. A lack of transparency from AI developers and the institutions using AI can unfortunately exacerbate this pre-existing distrust. It can feed into conspiracy-minded negative attitudes if people feel things are being hidden.
It's like a negative feedback loop. If you're already distrustful of systems and AI is presented or perceived as this mysterious, powerful, maybe uncontrollable system.
It just reinforces that distrust and fuels negative feelings about it.
Okay. Agreeableness linked to positive attitudes, conspiracy mentality to negative. What else?
Age also showed a significant relationship in this study. Older individuals tended to have more negative attitudes towards AI compared to younger individuals.
What were the suggested reasons for that correlation in the source? Is it just, get off my lawn?
Maybe a bit, but the source suggests more specific factors too. It could be related to a potential lack of familiarity with these rapidly evolving technologies among older demographics.
Less exposure growing up with them.
Right. Maybe a lack of technical understanding compared to digital natives, or even accessibility issues. Maybe AI interfaces or concepts are simply less intuitive or harder to navigate if you're not used to them.
Could also just reflect a general wariness towards big, disruptive new technologies that comes later in life sometimes.
That's plausible too. The barrier to entry, both cognitively and practically, might just feel higher for individuals who didn't grow up immersed in this stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you said some traits did not show a significant relationship in this study. Which ones?
Yeah, this is also important. In this specific study, looking at general attitudes towards AI as a broad concept, several traits didn't show a significant strong link.
Let's hear them.
These included conscientiousness, extroversion, and neuroticism from the Big Five, as well as all three traits in the dark triad Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism.
That is a bit surprising for some of those, isn't it? I mean, you might intuitively think extroversion linked to sociability and seeking novelty would correlate with more positive attitudes towards interactive AI like chatbots or social robots.
You might think that.
Or that maybe a manipulative Machiavellian person would have very strong opinions, positive or negative, about AI as a potential tool for influence or surveillance.
Right. The source actually discusses these points and offers potential explanations for why these traits didn't show a clear general correlation in this specific study, focusing on AI as a broad concept.
What's the thinking?
They suggest that for some of these traits, like extroversion or the dark triad traits, there might be conflicting tendencies regarding AI that cancel each other out when you ask about AI in general.
Conflicting tendencies.
Okay, take extroversion. An extrovert might love the idea of AI assistants that help facilitate social connection or provide novel entertainment,
Yeah.
but they might intensely dislike the idea of AI replacing human interaction in customer service or companionship roles or social settings. So, positive pull, negative pull, maybe no strong overall direction.
Ah, okay. What about the dark triad example?
Similarly, a highly Machiavellian individual might see AI as a powerful tool for manipulation and control over others, which, from their perspective, might be viewed positively as useful.
Right.
But they might also be acutely aware of and very wary of AI's potential for surveillance or analysis that could expose their own manipulative activities, which would lead to a negative view. So again, conflicting motivations could neutralize a clear overall attitude towards AI in general.
I see. So the relationship might be much more nuanced. It might depend heavily on the specific type or application of AI being considered, rather than just AI as a monolithic concept.
That's exactly what the source suggests. The general attitude might mask these more specific, potentially opposing reactions.
Okay, that makes sense. What about gender? Did they find differences there?
Interestingly, in this study, they did not find a significant gender difference in general attitudes towards AI as a concept.
No difference between men and women overall.
Not in this study's results for general AI attitude. The source notes this finding and mentions it's actually contrary to some previous research. But they point out that earlier research often focused on more specific types of AI, like physical robots, perhaps?
Where maybe stereotypes or different interests came into play.
Possibly. Where previous studies did sometimes find gender differences. But this particular study, with its focus on AI as a broader capability, didn't see that distinction emerge significantly.
Okay, so pulling that section together. It seems how you, the listener, might feel about AI in a general sense could be significantly influenced by your underlying level of trust reflected in agreeableness, your propensity for distrust and conspiracy thinking, that conspiracy mentality trait, and perhaps even your age. But maybe not necessarily by other big traits like how organized you are or how outgoing you are or your baseline anxiety levels or even your gender based on these specific findings for general AI attitudes.
It's a powerful illustration, isn't it? How our individual psychology acts as this filter for how we perceive and react to major technological shifts like AI.
It really highlights the importance of bringing psychological science into the conversation about AI adoption and societal impact. It's not just about the tech.
Absolutely not. It's deeply human.
Okay. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, pulling threads from across these different sources.
We sure have.
We started by setting the stage, didn't we? Defining AI as these adaptive learning programs causing rapid disruption.
And personality as that consistent dynamic pattern of how we adapt to our environment.
Then we explored how AI can subtly but powerfully shape our minds through things like information filtering and personalization.
And our behaviors through recommendations and virtual assistants nudging us along.
We delved into those serious risks the sources highlight. The potential for dependency eroding our own cognitive skills.
Significant threats to our privacy and data security.
The perpetuation of bias and discrimination through flawed or biased data.
And those challenges of control and responsibility with opaque black box AI systems.
And then we moved into the deeper moral and ethical ripples.
Yeah, exploring how AI analyzing personality data raises concerns about privacy and personal freedom. The ethical challenges of automated decision-making based on that data.
That fascinating possibility that just interacting with AI could change our expectations for human interaction.
And the ethical questions surrounding AI's potential for sophisticated manipulation.
And finally, brought it right back to the individual. Examining that research showing how our own personality traits like agreeableness and conspiracy mentality and even age can significantly predict our general attitudes towards AI.
Offering real insights into why some people seem more accepting or optimistic and others are much more wary or distrustful.
Yeah. One of the core sources really emphasizes that central tension throughout, doesn't it? AI offers tremendous convenience, efficiency, speed,
But it brings these significant potential negative impacts on human life and personality, including potentially reducing certain kinds of human interaction and causing major shifts in our behavior patterns.
And because of these potential negative impacts, both the direct harms and the ethical dilemmas, there's a strong, clear call coming from the sources about the necessity for ethical development and ethical use of AI.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme. It's not enough to just build AI that is capable or powerful. We absolutely must build and deploy AI that is responsible, that considers human well-being, human values.
And crucially, the sources highlight the vital role of education in this whole process. One source explicitly states that informing people about the responsible use of AI, its capabilities, but also its potential downsides, is essential for navigating this future effectively.
And that connects back beautifully to the attitude research we discussed, right?
Awesome.
Understanding why people hold different attitudes towards AI, recognizing that factors like inherent trust levels linked to agreeableness or inherent distrust, conspiracy mentality, play a significant role that can inform how we approach that education.
Tailoring the message.
Or at least being aware of the underlying psychology. For instance, transparency from developers and institutions about how AI works, what data is used, how decisions are made, that seems absolutely crucial to counteracting the distrust that fuels negative attitudes and conspiracy theories, as the source implies. Openness builds trust.
That makes perfect sense. Address the lack of transparency that feeds the distrust.
Exactly. The sources also stress that this isn't a problem just for computer scientists or engineers to solve alone.
No, it's interdisciplinary.
Yes. One source specifically suggests that psychological science has a significant contribution to make alongside the tech fields. Navigating these challenges, ensuring AI development leads to genuinely beneficial goals for humanity. It requires deep cooperation between psychology and AI technology.
Understanding the human element, our personality, our behavior, our ethics, our attitudes is absolutely key.
It's not just a technical challenge or a policy challenge. It's fundamentally a human challenge. It requires understanding ourselves just as much as we understand the technology we're creating.
And it's important to remember, too, as one source mentions when discussing limitations in future research, this is a rapidly evolving area. Our understanding is still growing constantly.
Definitely not the final word yet.
No. Future studies are needed to explore the role of different facets of personality, maybe how attitudes vary across different cultures.
The influence of specific situations,
Right.
how people perceive different AI capabilities differently, like is it just an AI that acts versus one that seems to experience or show agency? That might matter a lot.
The landscape is incredibly dynamic, and our scientific understanding is definitely racing to keep up.
For sure.
Okay. So, wrapping up this deep dive, we've pulled out some truly important threads from these sources today, I think. We've seen how AI isn't just a passive tool, but an active force shaping our digital environment, subtly influencing our minds and behaviors through filtering, personalization, recommendations.
We've explored the serious, tangible risks it introduces: dependency, privacy violations, algorithmic bias.
We've looked at the profound ethical considerations around automated decision-making and the potential for manipulation when AI understands our personalities, perhaps better than we understand ourselves sometimes.
And we've discovered how deeply personal factors, like our level of agreeableness or our tendency towards conspiracy beliefs, might predict how we fundamentally feel about AI in the first place.
Understanding these complex dynamics, as we said, isn't just academic knowledge. It directly helps you as a listener navigating this world.
To recognize AI's potential influences on your own mindset and behavior.
Yeah, to become more aware of the ethical stakes involved, and perhaps even understand your own gut reactions or deeper attitudes towards new AI technologies as they emerge.
It makes you a more informed participant in this massive technological shift, better equipped to engage with AI thoughtfully, critically.
Hopefully.
So, given all that, given that our own stress levels and personality traits influence how we view AI.
And AI actively influences how we interact with the world, the information we receive, maybe even how we relate to each other.
Consider this provocative thought to leave you with. Are we entering an era where technology and human nature are locked in a constant active feedback loop?
A feedback loop.
Yeah, where each one technology and our psychology is subtly but fundamentally changing the other in ways we are only just beginning to understand. And if so, what does that mean for who we are collectively becoming and who you are individually?
Wow. That is definitely a question worth pondering as AI continues its own deep dive into our lives. Thanks for joining us for this one.
Thank you.